I'm sure you can already guess what this week's video topic is. I mean, uploading anything that isn't talking about COVID-19 doesn't feel right at the moment. I'm currently recording this on May 6th, so 3 days before this video is uploaded, and there's still been a lot of talk on what should be done. For example, one of the things that has been talked about a lot is whether or not we should reopen the economy, and some states have already begun the process. Here's my opinion. The reason we social distance and stay at home is to flatten the curve, as you all know by now. Flattening the curve doesn't theoretically decrease the total number of people who get the virus, but it has multiple other purposes. You may have seen that it helps to lessen the burden so that we don't surpass hospital capacities. Yes, that certainly is one of the primary purposes, but another goal is to buy enough time so that treatments can be developed. Where are we at with that? Well, there are clinical trials happening for various antiviral drugs right now, and some have already been given to patients, but so far we don't have anything solid that has been approved. So my opinion is that we should at least wait until there is a working treatment out there right now before we reopen the economy, because as soon as we do, there's going to be a jump in the number of cases and the number of deaths. Now, that being said, I know a lot of people have a differing opinion than I do, so I'll say this. If we do decide to reopen the economy before a treatment is developed, we need to at least do it in a smart way. Large gatherings, for example, should still be discouraged. People should also be educated on how to protect themselves and stop the virus from spreading. I swear, if I see people out in the streets sneezing into the open and not into their arm, I'll personally sit them down and give them a lecture. 6 feet away, of course. Anyway, with that being said, there's a video out there that has been requested a lot to me. Apparently, there's a mini documentary that has gone semi-viral called Plandemic. And you know me, I usually never respond to documentaries because they have the highest chance of copyright striking me. But I'm making an exception this time because it promotes a very dangerous idea. The original video on YouTube has a very high like to dislike ratio, so you can tell that most people who watched it are conspiracy theorists. You can't actually see the original video right now because YouTube removed it, but many people have already mirrored it around. Now, the video is almost 30 minutes long, and I'm only going to respond to the parts I find to be relevant and important. My first impression is that this video goes pretty deep in promoting its conspiracy theory and spews a lot of nonsense that will make people doubt the healthcare system, which of course is bad and dangerous. So we'll take the time today to debunk some of their key points. Alright, roll the clip.
Dr. Judy Mikovits has been called one of the most accomplished scientists of her generation.
Sometimes I wonder how someone could accomplish so much in the field of medical research but then fall so deep into a rabbit hole. I guess with the large amount of researchers in the world, there's bound to be a few conspiracy theorists.
So you made a discovery that conflicted with the agreed upon narrative.
Correct.
And for that, they did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
You were arrested.
Correct.
And then you were put under a gag order. And so what did they charge you with?
Nothing.
But you were in jail.
I was held in jail with no charges. I was called a fugitive from justice. No warrant.
Okay, let's not kid ourselves here. I wasn't there to personally see what happened, obviously, but just from a simple Google search, we know that there was indeed a warrant for your arrest, which was for possession of stolen property and unlawful taking of computer data, equipment, supplies, or other computer-related property. And from what I've read at least, Dr. Mikovits seemed to have a history of stealing laboratory equipment and manipulating data for her own publications. Well, if that doesn't spell shady, I don't know what does. At the end of the day, this is just what I've read from news articles on the internet, but I'm more inclined to believe these reports than what Dr. Mikovits is saying herself. I mean, who would you believe?
They said, if you don't find the notebooks, if you don't find the material, which was not in my possession but planted in my house.
As if you took intellectual property from the laboratory. Is that correct?
It was intended to appear as if I took confidential material, names, and intellectual property from the laboratory.
Okay, so I guess from her story she was set up. Whatever, I don't care anymore about the details of her arrest and I don't want to poison the well anyway, so let's address what she's saying directly.
So Anthony Fauci was involved in a cover-up.
He directed the cover-up.
Okay. There's a long segment about why Dr. Fauci is evil and how he was responsible for delaying scientific progress on HIV. We're just gonna skip all that because it's unfounded and based on absolutely nothing, and frankly, we're here to talk about COVID-19, not HIV or Ebola.
I imagine these people stand to make hundreds of billions of dollars that own the vaccines.
And they'll kill millions, as they already have with their vaccines. There is no vaccine currently on the schedule for any RNA virus that works.
Dr. Mikovits apparently has something against RNA virus vaccines. It's one of the public claims she has made. I see no reason to believe that. They're the same as any DNA virus except that they need to go through a few extra steps to integrate their DNA into the host. What's different about them that makes the adaptive immune response behave differently against them? Nothing, that's what. So anyway, for the COVID-19 pandemic, she has publicly stated in a YouTube video, which since has been removed, that we don't need a vaccine for COVID and that a healthy immune system is enough to beat it. Yes, immune systems can be strong or weak depending on the person. You can avoid weakening your immune system by getting enough sleep and not being stressed all the time, for example, but realistically it's not going to prevent you from being infected or experiencing the symptoms if you are exposed. New viruses are threatening because they're new. No one has antibodies or memory cells within their blood to properly deal with them yet, and we can't manually immunize people because there is no vaccine and there is also no treatment. There's actually a section about this later, so I'll save my points for then.
So I have to ask you, are you anti-vaccine?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, vaccine is immune therapy, just like interferon alpha is immune therapy. So I'm not anti-vaccine. My job is to develop immune therapies. That's what vaccines are.
I can't really go on this point further because this documentary doesn't go over why she thinks retroviral vaccines are ineffective. It'd be nice if you could tell us the mechanism instead of leaving us a general statement with no proper explanation. By the way guys, before we go on, I would like to mention that I realized a third of you who are watching this content are not subscribed to the channel. That's almost as outrageous as the US not having enough testing kits. So please do me a favor and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks.
Do you believe that this virus was created in a laboratory?
I wouldn't use the word created, but you can't say naturally occurring if it was by way of the laboratory. So it's very clear this virus was manipulated, this family of viruses was manipulated and studied in a laboratory where the animals were taken into the laboratory, and this is what was released, whether deliberate or not.
Dr. Mikovits has posted many things on her Twitter, and one of them was promoting the idea that the virus was not naturally occurring. Okay, so I actually made an entire video explaining that the coronavirus is not purposely manipulated and how exactly we know that. Just as a brief summary, we don't need China to tell us anything to know the virus had a zoonotic source, and this can be obtained from the RNA evidence alone. The spike protein is not a perfect fit for the human ACE2 receptor, which you would expect to be a perfect fit if it were manipulated. In addition, we also don't see bits and pieces of genetic information from other organisms, which would be something present if this virus was man-made. Anyway, check out the video for a full explanation.
That cannot be naturally occurring. Somebody didn't go to a market, get a bat, the virus didn't jump directly to humans.
Nobody is claiming that the virus jumped directly from bats to humans because direct contact with bats is generally pretty rare. So we suspect it jumped from bats to another transitional organism who then gave it to us. We don't know exactly what the intermediate animal is as of now.
Pretty easy when you see, for me, when you see what the government has done, and that is that they took, quoting Dr. Birx,
we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality.
If my husband were to die, who has COPD, his lungs have fibrosis, his lungs would look exactly like somebody with COVID-19 theoretically, but he has no evidence of infection. So if you're not testing and you don't have evidence of infection, and if you walked in there today, they'd call it COVID-19.
Okay, so a few points to mention here. First of all, many respiratory diseases may seem similar because their symptoms may be similar, such as coughing, but ultimately you can sort of differentiate. So for example, if a patient has a fever along with a cough, COVID-19 is much more likely than COPD since COPD doesn't result in fever. Or for example, if a patient has had chronic coughing in the past, it would likely have been something else, like COPD, since it is a long-term illness, and this sort of goes for any respiratory complication. That being said, I agree completely that we should get as much testing as possible, and the lack of testing has shown to be one of America's greatest weaknesses. If we had accurate tests that told us if a patient had COVID-19, we wouldn't need to go around speculating all the time. Unfortunately, we don't have such a luxury, which to me is just absurd. By the way, when Dr. Birx said that they're taking a liberal approach to mortality, that doesn't mean we're diagnosing anything similar to COVID-19 as a COVID-19 death. She meant that if a patient had COVID-19 and died, then it would be recorded as a COVID-19 death even if it wasn't the direct cause. So for example, if a patient had pre-existing kidney problems and was infected by SARS-CoV-2 which resulted in the patient having kidney failure and dying, that would be considered a COVID-19 death even if it wasn't the direct cause of the death. Many other countries are not taking this approach, but in the United States we are. That's a big difference than just arbitrarily claiming any person to have similar symptoms to be labeled as infected with SARS-CoV-2.
When I'm writing up my death report, I'm being pressured to add COVID. Why is that? Why are we being pressured to add COVID to maybe increase the numbers and make it look a little bit worse than it is? I think so.
Why would they want to skew the number of deaths due to COVID-19?
Fear is a great way to control people, and sometimes people's ability to think for themselves is paralyzed if they're frightened enough.
Reporting deaths of people infected with COVID-19 but did not directly die of it is useful to some degree. Now, I personally don't know for sure why they took this approach, but is most likely to sort of make up for the lack of testing to begin with. Since numbers are already being underreported, this method of death counting could prove to be valuable. In addition to that, only reporting direct deaths from COVID-19 could be underreporting, because sometimes we can't tell for sure if the virus was a direct or indirect cause of death. No matter what, you'll end up leaning in one direction, and it's probably better in many ways to overestimate. But at the end of the day, it's just a method of reporting. Sure, it would mean we would have numbers higher than if we reported it the other way, but this information has been made publicly available for people to interpret by themselves. If the government really wanted to spread fear by artificially increasing the numbers, they never would have disclosed this method of counting to begin with.
The AMA was saying, doctors will lose their license if they use hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial drug that's been on the list of essential medicine worldwide for 70 years. Dr. Fauci calls that anecdotal
data.
This is essential medicine, and they keep it from the people.
I don't know why people are so obsessed about hydroxychloroquine. I know, President Trump mentioned it and implied it was some effective medication against COVID-19. Am I the only one who thinks that Trump shouldn't be talking about rumors or unverified ideas as if they're facts? Anyway, back to my point. I don't understand the hype about hydroxychloroquine because it's not even the one showing the most promise right now. In fact, some clinical trials have already failed, and any evidence of it working, like what Dr. Fauci said, is anecdotal. Although it is allowed in some hospitals to be used as emergency treatment. I just don't think that hyping this drug or any drug up would be good, since some people may take it outside of the hospital setting and suffer side effects such as heart failure. Now, you're probably wondering, which drug then is the one showing the most promise at the moment? While these are only preliminary results, remdesivir has shown some decent results in clinical trials. It has been proven to shorten the time of recovery by a significant amount. Now, that doesn't mean it reduces the severity of the infection because that hasn't been proven yet, but at least we know it has some positive antiviral effects against SARS-CoV-2. As a result, remdesivir has been given the green light to be used in emergency cases and seems to be the drug with the most promise at the moment. Now, please don't hoard or use remdesivir outside a hospital setting. I can't believe I have to say that in 2020.
Is it safe to say that anything that cannot be patented has been shut down intentionally because there's no way to profit from it? All these natural remedies that we have had forever.
Absolutely, that's fair to say, and that's exactly what's going on in COVID-19.
No.
The game is to prevent the therapies till everyone is infected and push the vaccines, knowing that the flu vaccines increase the odds by 36% of getting COVID-19.
Where does that data come from?
A publication last year where the military who had been vaccinated with influenza were more susceptible to coronaviruses.
I really didn't want to read another science paper, but here goes. The paper is looking at a concept called virus interference, which is a phenomenon that occurs when the host is vaccinated against a particular virus and then becomes resistant against other closely related viruses or superinfections. This concept hasn't been solidified, so take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, as can be seen from the paper, it reads, examining non-influenza viruses specifically, the odds of both coronavirus and human metapneumovirus in vaccinated individuals were significantly higher when compared to unvaccinated individuals. And then after that sentence, you can see the 1.36 figure, which is where the 36% came from. But is this really the case? Of course not, and there are a few reasons for this. First of all, this says nothing about SARS-CoV-2, the new coronavirus, which you can view differently from other coronaviruses, such as the ones used in this study. Second of all, the study isn't controlled in any way, shape, or form, making the results susceptible to all sorts of environmental variations, such as seasonal changes. In other words, this is not controlled enough to draw any conclusions from whatsoever. It's funny because if you go to the paper on PubMed and just look at the right of the page, there's a list of related papers, and the first recommended one there is a paper published a few years ago that disputes this paper's findings, saying influenza vaccination was not associated with detection of non-influenza respiratory viruses. So what have we learned from this? Reading a paper itself is not enough. You should also consider the context in which the paper was published, and also read and look at the methods itself to know if it's reliable.
So if you've ever had a flu vaccine, you were injected with coronaviruses.
Even if that paper was 100% correct, it said nothing about injecting you with coronaviruses from the flu vaccine.
Our immune system is used to touching. We share bacteria, staphylococcal, streptococcal bacteria, viruses. We develop an immune response daily to this stuff. When you take that away from me, my immune system drops. As I shelter in place, my immune system drops. You keep me there for months, it drops more. And now I'm at home, hand washing vigorously, washing the counters, worried about things that are indeed what I need to survive.
You're not immunodeficient, and you're not
elderly, you should be able to go out without any gloves and without a mask.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, new viruses are threatening because they're new. Not only do we not have vaccines and treatments yet, our body also do not have existing antibodies against them. We develop an adaptive immune response because we've been exposed to them before. A new virus means no previous exposure. Some people say, yeah, you should expose yourself more to dirty things so that you build your immune system, but that's not effective against SARS-CoV-2. Using their example, let's say you exposed yourself to bacteria and viruses such as Streptococcus. How does your previous exposure to that help against COVID-19?
Wearing the mask literally activates your own virus. You're getting sick from your own reactivated coronavirus expressions, and if it happens to be SARS-CoV-2, then you've got a big problem.
What the f***?
Hopefully, this is the wake-up call of all America to realize this makes no sense, and we win because it will take down the whole program with information like this. And for me, it's the great news that the doctors are waking up and saying, wait a minute.
The rest of the video is her ranting about this conspiracy theory and why people need to wake up and such, yada-da-da-da. I'm not going to go over it because there really isn't much to say. This type of stuff is something that is borderline unfalsifiable. So yeah, that's my time today. I appreciate everyone who has brought my attention to this documentary because otherwise I wouldn't have heard of it. Honestly, it's stuff like this that is dangerous. Misinformation kills people. We should all try to take part in exposing conspiracy theories, and trust me, there are a lot of them. Thank you so much to Fireshard, Liam, Don Jessica, Joel Goldenberg, and Jayan for their continuous support on Patreon. If you have any other suggestions for me, feel free to send me a message or fire me an email. See you next week.